What happens when entitlement meets reality? When someone who believes they belong at the top is forced to face the consequences of their own actions. Karen thought she owned the world. First-class lounges, VIP treatment, everything she deserved. But when she tried to push out a family who actually belonged there, she set off a chain reaction she never saw coming. A powerful CEO, a viral scandal, a downfall so swift, the internet never let her recover. This is the story of how one mistake became legendary and why some doors, once closed, never open again. Before we dive in, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story like this. The scent of freshly brewed espresso and polished leather filled the first-class lounge at JFK International Airport. Muted jazz hummed through the speakers, blending with the occasional clink of fine china and hushed conversations. Beneath the golden glow of chandeliers, the Johnson family sat comfortably on one of the plush sofas. Damon Johnson adjusted his designer blazer while scrolling through his phone, occasionally smiling at his wife, Angela, who was helping their daughter, Zoe, arrange her coloring books. They were used to luxury, successful investors in tech and hospitality. Their travel experience was nothing short of seamless. But today, something was different. A woman had just entered the lounge, and the moment she laid eyes on them, her expression soured. Karen Stetson, a middle-aged woman with sharp cheekbones and an even sharper attitude, strutted into the room, her high heels clicking against the marble floor. She was draped in an expensive cream-colored coat, her pearl necklace resting delicately on her stiff collar. She surveyed the room with a proprietary air until her gaze landed on the Johnsons. Her lips pursed. Her fingers tightened around her Louis Vuitton handbag. Karen took out her phone, turned slightly, and started recording. "They definitely don't belong here," she whispered into the mic. Then, with a forced smile, she approached the family. "Excuse me," she said, her voice dripping with fake politeness. "I think you might be in the wrong place. This lounge is reserved for first-class passengers only." Damon looked up, his brow slightly raised. "We know." He reached into his pocket, pulling out a pair of pristine first-class tickets. He held them up, just enough for her to see. Karen's smile faltered. Her eyes flickered over the tickets, and before she could stop herself, she snatched one from his hand. Angela inhaled sharply. Zoe, oblivious to the tension, hummed as she colored within the lines. Karen squinted at the ticket, her mind racing for an explanation. Must be a mistake," she muttered, shaking her head. "People do sneak in sometimes, you know. I'll just have to get someone to confirm this." She spun on her heel, waving down a uniformed airport staff member. A tall, broad-shouldered security officer approached, his expression unreadable. "Yes, ma'am?" he asked. Karen gave him a triumphant look. "I believe there's been an error. These people," she gestured toward the Johnsons, "might be in the wrong lounge. Could you check their tickets?" The officer turned to the Johnsons with professional courtesy. Damon, unfazed, handed over their tickets again. The officer glanced at them, then back at Karen. "These tickets are valid. First class. No mistake here." Karen blinked. No, that can't be right. Are you sure?" The officer's jaw tensed. "I am. But I do have a question for you, ma'am." Karen's confidence wavered. "For me?" "Yes. May I see your boarding pass?" A flicker of unease crossed her face. She hesitated, then reluctantly retrieved her ticket. The officer took one look and exhaled slowly. "This is an upgraded economy ticket. It doesn't grant automatic access to the lounge." For the first time, Karen looked genuinely flustered. "That must be a mistake," she stammered. "I always fly first class." "Not this time, ma'am." Damon exchanged a knowing glance with Angela. The tension in the room was palpable. Other passengers were beginning to watch the exchange, eyes flicking from Karen to the officer. Karen's cheeks flushed a shade deeper than her meticulously applied blush. But she wasn't done yet. "Well, if they are first class, Then someone must have mixed up the bookings, she huffed. I demand to speak to a manager. The officer remained calm. I can call the lounge supervisor if you'd like. Do it, Karen snapped. This needs to be sorted out immediately. She folded her arms, standing tall, as if willing her importance into existence. The Johnsons, meanwhile, remained seated, Damon resting his chin on his hand, Angela rubbing Zoe's back soothingly. They had seen this play out before. What they didn't know was how spectacularly it was about to backfire on Karen. A few minutes later, the glass doors to the lounge swung open, and in strode a tall man in a sleek navy suit. Karen's face lit up at the sight of him. Finally, she thought, someone who understands class and order. She straightened her posture, plastering on her most charming smile. Thank goodness, she said smoothly. I assume you're the one in charge. The man barely glanced at her. Instead, he strode right past, heading straight for the Johnson family. Damon, Angela, great to see you again, he greeted, shaking their hands warmly. Karen's smile froze. Her confidence cracked. The man turned to her and spoke 6 words that sent the entire room into stunned silence. Ma'am, you need to leave. Now. Karen stood motionless, her carefully curated confidence crumbling by the second. Excuse me, she stammered, blinking rapidly as if she had misheard. The man in the navy suit, tall, poised, and exuding effortless authority, fixed her with a calm but unyielding stare. His name tag gleamed under the lounge's warm lighting. Jonathan Carter, Chief Executive Officer. Karen's stomach twisted. The CEO? She had expected a mid-level manager, someone she could pressure into siding with her. Instead, she was standing before the head of the entire airline. Meanwhile, the Johnsons remained seated, watching the exchange with quiet amusement. Damon leaned back slightly, crossing one leg over the other, while Angela smoothed Zoe's curls with gentle fingers. Karen's throat felt dry. I think there's been some sort of misunderstanding, she began, forcing a chuckle. I was just trying to make sure everything was in order. Jonathan Carter didn't move an inch. Yes, he said smoothly, and in doing so, you've disrupted my valued guests. He gestured toward the Johnsons. Now, as I said, I need you to leave. Karen's eyes darted around the lounge, searching for support. A few passengers quickly looked away, pretending to check their phones or sip their drinks. Others exchanged whispers behind their hands. She had lost control of the narrative. Karen inhaled sharply. I don't see why I should leave. I have every right to be here. I paid for my ticket. Jonathan arched a brow. An economy ticket with an upgrade. Not first class. And that doesn't grant you access to this lounge. Karen opened her mouth, but no words came out. She wasn't wrong technically. She had paid extra for the upgrade. But the fact remained. She didn't belong here. She refused to back down. I'll have you know, she said, voice tightening, that I've been a loyal customer of this airline for years. I'm sure there's some way we can sort this out. Jonathan's lips curled into something resembling a smirk. Oh, I know exactly how to sort this out, he said, reaching into his suit pocket. Karen felt a flicker of hope. Maybe a private apology? A quiet arrangement to save face? But instead, Jonathan pulled out his phone. With a few swift taps, he turned the screen toward her. Karen's stomach dropped. There, playing in crisp HD, was her own video recording. The one she had secretly taken just minutes ago. The one where she whispered, "They definitely don't belong here." Karen's face went sheet white. Jonathan's voice was smooth as silk. Imagine my surprise when I walked in to find that you, of all people, were the cause of the commotion. You see, I don't just oversee operations, I also ensure that our guests feel welcomed and respected. His gaze hardened. And what you did, that goes against everything this airline stands for. Karen tried to muster a response, but all that came out was a strangled sound. Jonathan turned to the lounge staff. Escort her out. A polite but firm-looking security officer stepped forward. Karen recoiled. You can't be serious. Jonathan tilted his head. Oh, I am. The officer gestured toward the exit. This way, ma'am. Karen's face burned with humiliation. She had two options: make a bigger scene or leave with whatever dignity she had left. With an indignant huff, she snatched her bag from the table. As she turned to leave, a small, sweet voice piped up. Bye-bye, lady. Zoe, her bright eyes filled with innocent joy, waved at her. A ripple of laughter spread through the lounge. Even some of the staff chuckled. Karen's face twisted. She stormed toward the exit, her heels clicking angrily against the floor. But just as she reached the doorway, beep, 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 a sharp alarm blared through the lounge. Karen froze. A red light above the exit flashed wildly. The security officer frowned and tapped his earpiece. Hold on. There's an issue. Karen turned, her heart pounding. What now? A second officer appeared, holding a tablet. He glanced at the screen, then at Karen. Ma'am, according to our records, you don't have an official booking. The room went silent. Karen gaped at him. That's ridiculous. I checked and I went through security. I have my ticket. The officer held up the tablet, tilting it slightly so she could see. The screen displayed a passenger manifest, one that didn't include her name. Karen's pulse skyrocketed. That's not possible, she whispered. I used the self-check-in kiosk. The officer's brow furrowed. He tapped a few buttons, then his eyes widened slightly. Here's the issue. Karen held her breath. The officer looked up, expression unreadable. You never actually completed the final confirmation step. Karen felt as if the air had been sucked from the room. No. This couldn't be happening. You mean, she croaked, I don't have a flight? The officer nodded. That's correct, ma'am. Karen swayed slightly on her feet. She had been in a rush, distracted, frustrated, tapping through the screens without fully paying attention. Had she really? No. There had to be another explanation. I need to speak to someone, she snapped. Get me a manager. No, a supervisor. Someone important. Jonathan, still standing with his arms crossed, let out a low chuckle. Karen, he said smoothly, I am the most important person here. She whipped around to glare at him. Then fix this. Jonathan only shook his head. I could, but I won't, he said simply. Karen let out a strangled noise of frustration. The officer tapped his earpiece again. Ma'am, unfortunately, since you don't have an active booking, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the airport. Karen's mouth fell open. Leave? The entire airport? Yes, ma'am. Immediately. A cold wave of panic rushed through her. She had lost. Completely, utterly lost. With one last, furious glance around the room where every pair of eyes watched her, with barely concealed amusement, she turned and stormed out. The moment the doors shut behind her, the lounge burst into applause. Jonathan turned back to the Johnsons, smiling warmly. Now, he said, where were we? The automatic glass doors hissed shut behind Karen, sealing her outside the luxurious first-class lounge. Her breath came in short, furious bursts as she stood in the terminal, fists clenched so tightly that her nails dug into her palms. This wasn't over. It couldn't be over. She had been humiliated publicly, no less by some pompous airline CEO and a family that had no right to be there. At least, that's what she told herself. She needed a plan. With a sharp inhale, she straightened her coat, smoothing out invisible wrinkles as she forced herself to regain composure. Then she pulled out her phone and scrolled to the airline's customer service number. If the CEO wouldn't fix this, then maybe someone above him would. She pressed the call button. Welcome to Skylux Airlines customer service. Your call is important to us, Karen groaned as the automated voice droned on. She paced in tight circles near the lounge entrance, ignoring the curious stares from passing travelers. Then, just as she was about to hang up, she spotted something that made her blood run cold. Two airport security officers were heading straight for her. Karen stiffened, gripping her phone tighter. No, not again. The taller officer, the same one who had discovered she didn't have a confirmed flight, stopped a few feet away. "Ma'am," he said with the forced patience of someone who had dealt with far too many irate passengers, "we need you to come with us." Karen plastered on a tight-lipped smile. "I don't see why that's necessary." The officer exchanged a look with his partner before sighing. "We reviewed the security footage. It appears you entered the lounge without authorization by tailgating another passenger." Karen's stomach flipped. "They checked the cameras?" She forced a laugh. "That's absurd. I was invited in. The lounge staff didn't stop me." The second officer, a shorter woman with sharp eyes, spoke up. "No, ma'am. You followed another guest inside before the doors fully closed. That's considered an unauthorized entry." Karen's cheeks burned. I didn't know," she lied, shifting her weight from one foot to the other. "Regardless," the male officer said, "you violated airport security protocols. That's grounds for immediate removal from the premises." Karen's heart pounded. "You're kicking me out of the airport over this?" "Yes, ma'am," the officer said matter-of-factly. "And if you refuse to leave, we'll have to escalate this." For a moment, Karen considered standing her ground. She could demand to speak to a higher authority, throw another fit, make enough noise that anyone would take her side. But as she looked around, she realized no one cared. Passengers bustled through the terminal, immersed in their own schedules, their own priorities. The only people paying attention were the security officers, who were waiting for her to comply. Her hands trembled as she yanked her handbag over her shoulder. "This is ridiculous," she muttered, turning sharply on her heel. "You'll be hearing from my lawyer." Neither officer responded. As Karen stormed away, the walk of shame stretching endlessly before her, the humiliation settled deep in her bones. But the nightmare wasn't over yet. Across the country, a very different conversation was taking place. Inside a high-rise office overlooking Manhattan, Jonathan Carter leaned back in his chair, scrolling through his phone with mild amusement. The video had gone viral. It had started with a single post from an airport bystander. "Just watched a woman get kicked out of first class for trying to call security on a black family. She didn't even have a real ticket." Hashtag Karen Down then came. The footage, a blurry but damning clip captured from across the lounge, showed Karen snatching the Johnson's ticket, demanding an investigation, and ultimately being escorted out. Within hours, the hashtags #LoungeKaren and #KarenExposed trended nationwide. Meme pages had a field day. Screenshots of Karen's shocked expression, mouth agape, eyes wide with disbelief, circulated the internet with captions like, "When you try to be the main character but get written out in Act 1. Ma'am, your entitlement is in economy class." Plot twist. Karen was the imposter all along. Even major news outlets picked up the story. Jonathan shook his head with a smirk before glancing up at Damon Johnson, who sat across from him in the executive lounge. "Looks like you've gone viral," Jonathan mused, turning his phone toward Damon. Damon raised a brow as he read the comments. Angela, sitting beside him, chuckled softly. "Well," she said, "I can't say I'm surprised." Jonathan exhaled, leaning forward. "I'll be honest. Normally, we try to keep incidents like this off the internet, but," he gestured to the screen, "this one got away from us fast." Damon shrugged. "Not our problem. She made her bed." Jonathan smirked. "That she did." Zoe, who had been quietly drawing in her coloring book, suddenly lifted her head. "Mommy, does this mean the mean lady is famous now?" she asked. Angela laughed. "Not the kind of famous she wanted, sweetheart." Zoe frowned. "Then why was she so mad at us?" Damon's expression softened. He reached over, tucking a stray curl behind her ear. "Because some people judge others before they even know them," he said gently. "But that's their mistake, not ours." Zoe nodded slowly, then went back to coloring. Jonathan smiled at the family before standing. Well, my friends, it's been an eventful morning. But now that all the drama's over, he checked his watch. You still have a flight to catch. Angela stretched, standing alongside Damon. That we do. Let's get to our gate. As the Johnsons gathered their things, Jonathan clapped a hand on Damon's shoulder. Enjoy your flight, he said warmly. And next time, the drinks are on me. Damon grinned. I'll hold you to that. With that, the Johnsons walked toward their departure gate, first-class tickets in hand, dignity intact. Meanwhile, somewhere in the depths of social media, Karen's reputation continued to crumble. And the internet never forgets. Karen slumped into a plastic chair near the airport exit, her mind spinning. How had everything unraveled so quickly? One moment, she had been asserting her rightful place in first class, and the next, she was being escorted out of the airport like some kind of criminal. But this wasn't over. She just needed to regroup, get a hotel, book another flight, lay low for a bit. With shaky fingers, she pulled out her phone and tapped the airline app. But as soon as the home screen loaded, an urgent red banner flashed across the top. Your account has been temporarily suspended due to a security violation. Please contact customer service. Karen's stomach twisted. They had banned her? Before she could fully process the horror of it, her phone buzzed with a flood of incoming notifications. At first, she thought they were from friends. Maybe someone had seen what happened and was reaching out to offer support. But as she opened her messages, her breath hitched. It wasn't support. It was mockery. Screenshots. Links. A barrage of text from coworkers, acquaintances, even distant relatives she hadn't spoken to in years. Karen, is this you? Saw the video. Yikes. Just yikes. LOL, you really got yourself kicked out of an airport? Her heart pounded as she tapped one of the links. It took her straight to Twitter. Her own face stared back at her frozen mid-gasp, eyes wide, mouth agape. The clip had already racked up millions of views. Someone had even slowed it down, adding dramatic music and zoom-ins for effect. When you try to be the main character, but end up the villain. She scrolled frantically, her fingers trembling. Everywhere she looked, her name was trending. Lounge Karen exposed economy class energy. Even major news outlets had picked up the story. Karen's mouth went dry. No. No, no, no. She needed to stop this. Her hands flew across the screen as she typed furiously. This is completely out of context. That family was being rude, and I was just trying to get help. She hit send. A minute later, the first reply rolled in. Lady, you literally grabbed their ticket. You were the rude one. Then another. LMAO, she's trying to play the victim now. Classic. And another. Ma'am, take the L and log off. Karen let out a strangled noise of frustration, gripping her phone so tightly her knuckles turned white. This couldn't be happening. Her reputation, her image was shattering right before her eyes. And the worst part? She had no control over it. Back in Manhattan, inside a sleek corporate office, a young PR specialist named Rachel Carter, Jonathan's niece, sat at her desk, scrolling through the trending hashtags. She sipped her coffee, shaking her head. Wow! She really did it to herself. Rachel had seen plenty of social media disasters before, but this was next level. Her phone buzzed with a call from her uncle. Hey, Uncle John, she greeted, putting him on speaker as she continued scrolling. Jonathan's voice was light with amusement. Rachel, tell me, how bad is it? Rachel smirked. Well, she's officially a meme now. So, pretty bad. Jonathan chuckled. Any major fallout for us? Not at all. In fact, your statement about welcoming all valued guests with dignity is getting praised. People are calling you the CEO we need. Jonathan exhaled. Good. Let's keep it that way. Rachel leaned back in her chair. And her? Any sign she's learned her lesson? Jonathan snorted. Not likely. But the internet's handling that for us. Rachel laughed. Yeah, she picked the wrong era to act entitled. Karen scrolled furiously, looking for a way out. The articles, the reaction videos, the TikToks mocking her. It was everywhere. Then, she spotted a small glimmer of hope. A post from an anti-cancel culture influencer, arguing that she was just another victim of woke outrage. Karen seized on it. She crafted a long, dramatic post about how she had been misunderstood, about how she was the real victim, how people needed to hear her side of the story. She hit publish. For a moment, she felt a rush of relief. Finally, someone would defend her. Then, the first comment appeared. "Bestie, there's literal video proof." Karen gritted her teeth. But before she could reply, another notification popped up. Her phone number had been leaked. Within minutes, she was bombarded with unknown calls and texts. Voicemails ranged from taunts to outright laughter. Panicked, she scrambled to change her number, but the damage was already done. Her name was now forever tied to this. And the internet never forgets. High above the clouds, Damon and Angela Johnson reclined comfortably in their first-class seats, sipping champagne as Zoe slept peacefully between them. Damon scrolled through his phone, shaking his head. Karen still trying to fight the internet. Angela chuckled. She should have just walked away. Damon turned to his wife, smiling. "Glad we took this trip?" Angela took his hand. "Absolutely." As their plane soared toward its destination, they left the drama far behind. Karen, however, was only just beginning to realize some mistakes are unforgivable. And hers had just become legendary. Karen slammed her phone onto the cheap motel nightstand, her breath coming in shallow gasps. The dingy room smelled of stale air and industrial cleaner. The flickering neon sign outside cast eerie red light through the blinds, staining the walls in a way that made her feel trapped. She was supposed to be in first class, right now sipping champagne, posting a perfectly curated photo of her luxury experience on Instagram. Instead, she was holed up in a motel, her life crumbling faster than she could salvage it. Her phone buzzed again. Karen hesitated before picking it up. Her sister, Linda, was calling. For a brief moment, she felt a flicker of hope. Finally, someone who understood. She swiped to answer. "Linda, thank God, what the hell did you do?" Karen flinched at the sharpness in her sister's voice. "A what?" Linda sighed. "Karen, your name is everywhere. I just had to explain to my boss why my sister is the latest viral disaster." Karen's stomach twisted. "It's not my fault. The media twisted everything." "Oh, really?" Linda snapped. "Because the video is pretty clear. You humiliated yourself, Karen. You embarrassed that family. You stole their ticket." Karen's face burned. "I wasn't stealing. I was just what?" Linda interrupted. "Trying to prove you were better than them? That you belonged in first class more than they did." Karen gritted her teeth. "I was making sure there wasn't a mistake." Linda let out a humorless laugh. "The only mistake was you thinking you could get away with it." Karen clenched her jaw, gripping the phone tighter. "So you're just going to side with them?" "I'm siding with reality, Karen," Linda snapped. "And reality says you're officially a walking joke. You got kicked out of an airport, you got caught lying, and now the internet is shredding you." Karen swallowed hard. "I just need to explain my side," Linda cut her off. "Oh, you mean like that disastrous post you made earlier? The one where you tried to play the victim?" Karen's fingers trembled. "I was just Karen." Linda's voice softened slightly, but the exhaustion in it was clear. "You need to stop. Log off. Lay low. And for God's sake, stop digging the hole deeper." Karen opened her mouth, but nothing came out. She had always been the strong one, the confident one, the one in control. But now, she had nothing. Linda exhaled. "Look, I have to go, but if you're expecting me to defend you, don't. I'm not ruining my life because of your mess." And then, just like that, she hung up. Karen stared at the screen, her pulse hammering. Even her own sister had abandoned her. Karen groaned, dragging her hands down her face. This couldn't be happening. She needed an ally. anyone who could help her fix this. She opened Twitter again, scrolling through her notifications. The anti-cancel culture influencer she had hoped would defend her? He had already moved on to another controversy. The flood of strangers calling her entitled, arrogant, and out of touch? Still growing. Her hands shook as she tapped the search bar and typed. Karen Stetson. The results made her stomach churn. Karen Stetson, the face of first-class entitlement. Newsweek, viral lounge Karen tries to defend herself and fails miserably. BuzzFeed, what happened to Karen Stetson? The internet's newest meme explained. The Verge, her LinkedIn profile was flooded with people mocking her. Her Facebook comments were a war zone. And worst of all, her job had issued a statement. The views and actions of Karen Stetson do not reflect the values of our company. We are currently reviewing this matter internally. Karen's blood ran cold. No, they wouldn't. They couldn't. But then her email refreshed, and sitting at the top of her inbox was a message with the subject line, Urgent. HR review meeting scheduled. She clicked on it so fast her fingers slipped. Karen, due to recent events, we need to discuss your status at the company. Please attend a mandatory meeting at 9 a.m. tomorrow. She felt the world tilting. Her job, her career was hanging by a thread. She had spent years climbing the corporate ladder, proving her worth, making a name for herself. And now, it was all slipping away because of one moment. She wanted to scream. Across the country, the Johnson family had landed safely at their destination. Damon stretched as he stepped off the jet bridge, feeling the warm breeze of California's coast. Angela walked beside him, holding Zoe's hand as she chattered excitedly about all the places they would visit. Their phones buzzed again, another update from the internet. Angela glanced at the screen, then nudged Damon with a knowing smirk. Guess what? Damon raised an eyebrow. What? She just got called in for a company review. Damon whistled low. That was fast. Angela chuckled. You play stupid games, you win stupid prizes. Zoe tugged on Damon's sleeve. Daddy, are we going to see the ocean today? Damon smiled down at her. We sure are, sweetheart. As they walked toward their waiting car, Damon slid his phone into his pocket, letting the drama fade into the background. Karen's downfall was her own doing, and they had a vacation to enjoy. Karen barely slept. She had tossed and turned in the scratchy motel sheets, her mind racing with every possible outcome of the morning ahead. By the time the sun rose, her nerves were frayed, and dark circles shadowed her eyes. This wasn't just an HR meeting. This was an execution. Her hands trembled as she pulled her blazer tight and stared at her reflection in the motel mirror. The woman looking back at her wasn't the confident, composed professional she once was. She looked exhausted. You just have to explain yourself. Play the victim if you have to. They need you. Straightening her posture, she grabbed her bag and headed out. The elevator ride up to her office felt different today. Colleagues who normally greeted her with polite nods now avoided eye contact. Some openly whispered as she passed. Others smirked. By the time she reached the conference room, her palms were sweaty. Inside, for members of senior management sat waiting, their faces unreadable. At the center of the table was Martin Holloway, the company's COO, a no-nonsense man in his 60s, known for his icy professionalism. Karen swallowed hard and took a seat. Martin folded his hands. Karen, assume you know why we're here. Karen nodded stiffly, forcing herself to keep her voice steady. Yes, and I want to clarify that this entire situation has been blown out of proportion. Martin held up a hand, silencing her. We've seen the footage. We've reviewed the online discourse. And quite frankly, we're deeply disappointed. Karen's jaw clenched. Disappointed? Over one incident? I have given this company years of loyalty, and in return, Martin interjected, we expected professionalism, not public humiliation. Karen felt the room closing in on her. I was defending myself. The airline treated me unfairly. A woman across the table, Lisa Chun from HR, leaned forward. Karen, let's be clear, you weren't defending yourself. You were recorded stealing another passenger's ticket, harassing their family, and then lying about it on social media. Karen's face burned. I wasn't lying. Lisa arched an eyebrow. You posted that you were a victim of woke outrage. And yet, the CEO of Skylux Airlines himself publicly refuted your version of events. Karen's stomach twisted. She knew Jonathan Carter's response had gone viral, but she hadn't fully grasped the weight of it. Martin exhaled sharply. Karen, this isn't just an online scandal. We've already received complaints from clients. Some have hinted they may take their business elsewhere because they don't want their brand associated with someone accused of racial bias. Karen's breath caught in her throat. Clients? Pulling out? Surely you're not, she started, but Martin shook his head. Our reputation is at stake. And in this business, perception is everything. He picked up a file folder and slid it across the table toward her. Karen's pulse quickened. Her hands shook as she flipped it open. Termination agreement. Karen's world stopped. Her vision blurred as she skimmed the words. Effective immediately. No severance. Violation of company policies. Irreparable damage to public image. She felt like she'd been punched in the gut. This is absurd, she choked out. Martin sighed. Karen, let's be honest. There's no coming back from this. Karen gripped the table, her nails digging into the wood. You can't do this. I've worked too hard. You did this to yourself, Lisa said, shaking her head. Silence hung in the air. Finally, Martin pushed a pen toward her. You can sign now, or we can officially terminate you without allowing you to resign. Your choice. Karen's entire body went numb. This was it. Her career, her carefully built image was gone. Her fingers felt foreign as she picked up the pen. She hesitated for half a second, but she knew she had no leverage. She signed. The moment the ink dried, Lisa reached over, slid the document back, and closed the folder with a soft click. Martin stood. Security will escort you out. Karen's breath hitched. Escort me? The doors opened, and two uniformed security officers stepped inside. She recoiled. They weren't even letting her walk out on her own terms. Tears burned at the corners of her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Slowly, stiffly, she stood, straightened her blazer, and walked out. Every step through the office felt heavier than the last. She could feel the eyes on her, whispers, smirks, pitying glances. By the time she reached the front doors, her entire body was shaking. The security officers stopped just before the exit. We'll need your company badge. Karen swallowed hard and yanked the lanyard from around her neck. She slapped it into one of their palms. The doors slid open. She stepped outside into the blinding daylight. And just like that, she was nobody. Across the country, the Johnson family had settled into their beachfront resort. Damon scrolled through his phone, letting out a low whistle. Wow! She got fired. Angela looked up from her drink. Already? Yep, Damon said, turning the screen toward her. Leaked memo confirms it. Behavior incompatible with company values. Angela took a sip of her cocktail. Good. Damon chuckled, shaking his head. You don't even feel a little bad for her? Angela smirked. Do you? Damon thought about it for a second, then shrugged. Nope. Zoe, sitting between them, looked up. Daddy, can we go to the beach now? Damon smiled, ruffling her hair. Absolutely, sweetheart. As they walked toward the ocean, the weight of the past was gone. Karen, on the other hand, she had just learned the hardest lesson of all: some bridges burn themselves. Karen sat in her car, gripping the steering wheel so hard her knuckles turned white. The termination papers lay crumpled on the passenger seat, mocking her. Fired. Escorted out of the office like a criminal. The reality of it was finally sinking in. She had no job, no first-class seat, no status, nothing. Her phone, now her greatest enemy, wouldn't stop buzzing. She had muted notifications, but texts from old coworkers, distant acquaintances, and even reporters kept pouring in. Karen, any comments on your firing? Would you be interested in an exclusive interview? Daily Post is covering your downfall. Care to share your side of the story? Karen clenched her jaw and threw the phone onto the seat. She wasn't about to become some sob story for the world to gawk at. She needed control. Her hands trembled as she opened Twitter again. Her last post, the one claiming she was the real victim, had backfired spectacularly. The quote tweets were brutal. "Sis, take the L and move on." This might be the first time someone got canceled in real time. I love it when bad things happen to bad people. Karen's blood boiled. They're vultures. She inhaled sharply and started typing. "I will be pursuing legal action against Skylux Airlines for defamation. The truth will come out soon." She hit send. For a moment, a flicker of satisfaction settled in her chest. Then the first reply popped up. "Ma'am, what exactly do you think they lied about? You got caught in 4K. Another. "Defamation requires you to have a reputation to ruin." And another. "Sue them with what money? Your last paycheck." Karen's breath hitched. She had nothing left to fight with. And the world knew it. Karen drove aimlessly, the city blurring past her. Everything she had built, her career, her reputation, was gone. With shaking hands, she pulled into the driveway of her townhouse. At least she still had this. But as she stepped onto the porch, she noticed something that made her stomach drop. A letter taped to her door. Her hands shook as she tore it open. Notice of termination of lease. Karen's heart stopped. No. No, no, no. Her eyes darted over the text. Failure to comply with housing association policies. Damage to building reputation. Eviction effective in 30 days. She staggered back, gripping the doorframe. Her own housing association was cutting her off. Because of some viral drama? She let out a hollow laugh. Her entire life was collapsing. Far away from Karen's downward spiral, the Johnson family was enjoying a peaceful evening by the ocean. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden hues across the water. Damon stretched, watching Zoe chase waves along the shore. Angela scrolled through her phone, then smirked. "She's spiraling," she murmured. Damon raised an eyebrow. "Still." Angela nodded. "Tried to threaten a lawsuit. It's not going well." Damon chuckled. "That woman doesn't know when to quit." Angela locked her phone and leaned back in her chair. "Let's not waste another thought on her." Damon glanced toward Zoe, who was giggling as the tide washed over her feet. He smiled. Agreed. They had moved on. Karen, however, she was just beginning to realize there was no way back. Karen sat in her now half-empty townhouse, surrounded by packing boxes. The walls felt smaller than before. The once pristine space, carefully curated with expensive furniture and decorations, now felt like a cage. She had 30 days before she had to be out. Less than a month to figure out what came next. But no job meant no income. No income meant no options. Her fingers hovered over her laptop keyboard as she pulled up her bank account. The numbers made her stomach churn. Between her high-rise rent, car payments, and credit card bills, she had enough to last 2 months. 3 if she cut everything. Karen clenched her jaw. This is temporary. I just need a plan. But every job lead she clicked on led to a dead end. Her LinkedIn profile, once a shining example of corporate success, was now flooded with comments. "Oh look, it's first-class Karen trying to get a job. Good luck with that. Maybe she can work at the airport cleaning the lounge she got kicked out of." Her reputation was poison. Every company she had ties with had either cut her off or refused to associate with her. She wasn't just unemployed. She was blacklisted. Desperate, Karen opened her contacts. There had to be someone, an old boss, a distant colleague, who could help her. Then she saw it. Daniel Royce, PR consultant. Her ex-boyfriend. They had ended things years ago, but Daniel had connections. He worked in damage control. If anyone could help her, he could. She hesitated only a moment before calling. The phone rang. Once. Twice. Then Karen? Relief flooded her chest. Daniel? Hi, why are you calling me? Karen's breath caught. I need your help. Silence. Then a sigh. Karen, tell me you're not calling about the airport thing. She swallowed. It's gotten out of hand. People are ruining my life over one mistake. Daniel laughed. A sharp, humorless sound. Karen, you didn't just make a mistake. You became the mistake. Karen gritted her teeth. So you're just going to ignore everything we had? You won't even consider helping me? Daniel exhaled. Look, I get that this sucks. But you don't need PR. You need self-awareness. Karen's hands curled into fists. What's that supposed to mean? It means, Daniel said flatly, that you're still blaming everyone else. The company, the airline, the internet. When are you going to take responsibility? Karen felt heat rise in her face. That's not fair. It's exactly fair, Daniel snapped. Karen, I work in crisis management. I help people fix their own messes. But you? You don't even think you did anything wrong. Karen's nails dug into her palm. So you're saying I should just what? Apologize? Beg. Daniel was quiet for a moment. Then, in a softer tone, he said, I'm saying you should start listening. But I don't think you're ready for that. Karen opened her mouth, but the line clicked dead. Karen sat frozen, phone still in her hand. The last person she thought might help her had just shut the door. Her chest tightened. This wasn't temporary. This was permanent. The world wasn't going to forget. And for the first time, a terrifying thought crept into her mind. What if I never recover from this? She looked around at the empty boxes, the fading sunlight casting long shadows over her once perfect life. She was truly, completely alone. Karen sat in the dim light of her nearly empty townhouse, the glow from her laptop screen casting eerie shadows on the walls. She had spent the last 2 hours sending out desperate job applications, scouring company websites, reaching out to old colleagues, anyone who might be willing to give her a second chance. Her inbox remained empty. Her phone, once buzzing with calls and messages, was now silent. No responses. No offers. Just a void. She refreshed her LinkedIn for the 100th time, praying for something, anything to break the silence. Instead, a new post from a former coworker popped up. Karen's stomach dropped as she read the first line. Let this be a lesson. Your reputation matters. Some doors, once closed, never open again. The post had over 10,000 likes. And the comments? Brutal. She did this to herself. Actions have consequences. Maybe she should learn how to say, welcome to Starbucks next. Karen's breath hitched. This wasn't just temporary. She had destroyed herself. Her fingers trembled as she clicked on her company email, the one she was no longer supposed to access. The system had already locked her out. She tried logging in again. Error. Unauthorized user. Karen let out a strangled noise, slamming the laptop shut. They had erased her. She wasn't just fired. She was forgotten. Her hands were shaking as she grabbed her phone and scrolled through her contacts. She had burned too many bridges. But there was one person left. Her mother. Karen hesitated. She hadn't called in months. The last conversation had ended in an argument, her mother accusing her of being too judgmental, too entitled. Karen had dismissed it then. Now, she wasn't so sure. She took a deep breath and hit call. It rang. Once. Twice. Then Karen. Her mother's voice was warm but guarded. Karen swallowed hard. Huh? I need help. Silence. Then, carefully, I saw what happened. Karen squeezed her eyes shut. It's not what it looks like. The media twisted everything, her mother sighed. Karen, I love you. But I need you to be honest with yourself. Karen's throat tightened. I am being honest. Are you? Her mother asked gently. Or are you just blaming the world for your own mistakes? Karen felt anger rise, but beneath it, something deeper. A gnawing doubt. Her mother's voice softened. I raised you to be better than this, Karen. And I know you can be. But first, you have to let go of this pride that's keeping you from seeing the truth. Karen's grip on the phone tightened. She wanted to argue, to defend herself. But for the first time, she had no fight left. She just sat there, the weight of everything pressing down on her. Her mother's voice cut through the silence. If you want to come home, the door is open. Karen's breath caught. She hadn't needed her mother's help in years. Going back now after everything felt like defeat. But maybe defeat was all she had left. She swallowed her pride. Mom, she whispered. And for the first time in a long time she listened. Karen sat in the driver's seat of her car, parked outside a modest suburban house, the house she had grown up in. It looked smaller than she remembered. The white paint on the shutters had begun to peel, and the rose bushes her mother had once cared for so meticulously were overgrown. She hadn't been back in years. And now, here she was returning with nothing but a suitcase, and the weight of her own mistakes pressing down on her. She gripped the steering wheel, hesitating. Part of her wanted to drive away, to avoid the humiliation of coming home after losing everything. But deep down, she knew she had nowhere else to go. With a deep breath, she opened the car door, grabbed her suitcase, and walked up the front steps. Before she could knock, the door swung open. Her mother stood there, arms crossed, her eyes searching Karen's face. Neither of them spoke for a moment. Then her mother stepped aside. Come in, she said quietly. Karen hesitated, then stepped over the threshold. The house smelled the same freshly brewed coffee, a hint of lavender from the old candles her mother always kept. It felt safe. Her mother led her to the kitchen, where a warm meal was already waiting. Karen sat down, staring at her plate. I don't deserve this, she muttered. Her mother sat across from her. Maybe not. Karen flinched. Then her mother sighed. But I'm your mother, and I know you need this. Karen swallowed hard, her fingers gripping the edge of the table. I messed up. Her mother nodded. Yes. Karen's throat tightened. I don't know how to fix it. Her mother sipped her tea. Maybe you don't. Maybe you just learn from it. Karen let out a shaky breath. The internet won't let me forget. The internet forgets faster than you think, her mother said. But what matters isn't what they remember. It's what you do next. Karen looked down at her plate, appetite gone. For so long, she had been fighting, denying everything, blaming the world. Now, she felt empty. But in that emptiness, there was something else. Something she hadn't felt in a long time. Clarity. Thousands of miles away, Damon Johnson watched as Zoe ran along the beach, her laughter carried by the ocean breeze. Angela sat beside him, sipping her drink, the setting sun painting gold across the sky. They hadn't thought about Karen in days. Her scandal had faded into background noise, just another internet story swallowed up by the endless cycle of news. Damon exhaled, feeling lighter than he had in a long time. Their lives hadn't changed, but they had learned something important. People like Karen, they would always exist. But how they reacted, that was their choice. And they had chosen peace. Back in her childhood bedroom, Karen stared at the blank ceiling. She had lost everything. But maybe, just maybe, she could build something new. Not based on entitlement. Not based on privilege. But on something real. For the first time, she let go of the person she used to be. And for the first time in years, she slept peacefully. Some people learn their lessons the hard way. Others, they never learn at all. What do you think? Did Karen deserve what happened? Or do you believe in second chances? Let us know in the comments. And before you go, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your country or city below. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more gripping tales of drama, redemption, and unexpected twists. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an update. See you in the next one.